Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the advice that autistic women receive.
Okay.
And a lot of times this advice, even though it's meant to be helpful, can actually be
Yeah,
quite damaging.
really damaging.
And so we're going to be taking a look at a blog post from Cheap ABA titled Worst Cringy Advice Autistic Women Hear.
All right.
And try to understand why some of this advice, though often given with good intentions,
Mm-hmm.
can actually be quite harmful.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that advice that works for like a neurotypical person
Right. Yeah.
may not work for an autistic woman.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to be exploring today.
Yeah.
And what we can all do to be more supportive allies.
It all comes down to understanding like the unique experiences of autistic women
Yeah.
and how their neurological differences shape their interactions with the world.
Yeah. So let's start with a piece of advice that I'm sure many of you have heard before.
Okay.
You just need to be more confident in social situations.
Right.
Seems harmless enough, right?
Yeah. It sounds like something that could be helpful.
But for autistic women, this advice can be incredibly frustrating.
It can be incredibly frustrating. Imagine like you're struggling with social anxiety, which is a common experience for autistic people,
Okay.
and you're being told to just be more confident. It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off.
Exactly. It's so dismissive.
It is.
It completely ignores those underlying neurological differences that contribute to social anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And it minimizes the effort that autistic women might already be putting in to navigate social situations.
Yes, and that can lead to something called internalized ableism,
Oh, wow.
where they internalize these negative messages
Yeah.
and start to believe that they're somehow deficient or broken.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It is.
It's like telling someone that they need to fundamentally change who they are in order to be accepted.
Exactly. And that leads us to another piece of cringy advice.
Okay.
You should try to be more like, and then they insert like the name of a neurotypical woman.
Oh, yeah. This one makes my skin crawl.
Mine too.
It's like this insidious pressure to conform to like neurotypical standards.
Yes, as if there's some kind of blueprint for how women should behave,
Exactly.
and that being autistic is somehow wrong, and that autistic women need to suppress their true selves in order to fit in.
Right.
And this can be so damaging to their self-esteem and sense of identity.
And it also completely misses the whole point of neurodiversity.
Right.
Like the beauty of humanity lies in our differences.
Yeah.
And trying to erase those differences just makes the world less vibrant and less interesting.
Right. Instead of trying to fit into that neurotypical box, we
Yeah.
should be celebrating the unique strengths and the perspectives that autistic individuals bring to the table.
Okay, let's unpack another piece of advice that is often disguised as helpful.
Okay.
You're just being too sensitive.
Yes. The classic sensitivity card.
Right.
This one is so harmful because it dismisses the very real sensory sensitivities that autistic people experience.
Imagine being bombarded by like loud noises,
Yeah.
bright lights, or strong smells,
Right.
and then being told that you're just overreacting or being dramatic.
Yeah,
It's so invalidating.
it is.
And it makes it so difficult for autistic women to advocate for their needs.
Exactly. Sensitivities are a neurological difference. They're not a personality flaw.
Right.
They're not something that you can just like snap out of.
Yeah.
And minimizing those experiences can make it harder for autistic women to feel comfortable in certain environments.
It creates this pressure to mask their sensitivities,
Right.
which can be incredibly exhausting and even lead to sensory overload and meltdowns.
Yeah. And speaking of masking, that brings us to another piece of advice that we need to unpack.
Okay.
Fake it till you make it.
Oh, this one is bad.
This one is especially pernicious because it encourages autistic women to suppress their authentic selves, to appear more neurotypical. It's like telling them to wear a mask all the time,
Right.
which can be incredibly draining and lead to burnout and mental health issues.
And it's not a sustainable long-term solution.
No.
And it just perpetuates the idea that there's something inherently wrong with being autistic, that it needs to be hidden or disguised.
Research has shown a strong link between masking and autistic burnout,
What?
which is a state of like physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion
Oh, wow.
that can be debilitating. And autistic women often report feeling like they're living a double life, constantly code switching, trying to fit in.
Right.
And it takes a huge toll on their well-being.
And it sends a message that they're only acceptable if they pretend to be someone they're not.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so important to create environments where autistic individuals feel safe and accepted for who they are.
Yes.
Where they don't have to constantly mask their true selves.
Yes. I love that.
Now, there's one final piece of advice that we need to address.
Okay.
And that is, you're not really autistic. You're just, and then insert some sort of stereotype.
Oh, I hate this one.
This one is so incredibly damaging.
It is.
On multiple levels.
Yeah.
First, it completely dismisses the individual's lived experience and self-identification.
Right.
And let's not forget that many autistic women are misdiagnosed or have their experiences dismissed due to societal biases and a lack of understanding about how autism presents in women.
Exactly. There's this common misconception that autism presents the same way in all individuals,
Right.
which is simply not true.
Right. Autistic women often present differently than autistic men.
Yeah.
And that has historically led to underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. They may be better at masking their traits.
Right.
Or they may express their autism in ways that don't fit the stereotypical image.
Right.
And this can lead to a lot of self-doubt and confusion. They may start to question their own experiences and feel like they're not really autistic.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you're going crazy.
Right. And this highlights a crucial point.
Okay.
Believing and validating the experiences of autistic women is paramount.
Yes.
Their voices need to be heard.
Absolutely.
Their stories need to be shared. And their perspectives need to be taken seriously.
100%.
And it's important to remember that autism is a spectrum.
Yes, it is.
There is no one-size-fits-all experience, and every autistic individual is different with their own unique strengths, challenges, and ways of navigating the world.
Exactly.
So we spent a lot of time talking about the problem.
We have.
But what can we do about it?
That's a good question.
How can we move from criticism to positive action?
I like that.
What are some better ways to respond to these well-meaning but often harmful pieces of advice?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that we'll delve into in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, that's good.
We're going to explore some alternative responses that are more supportive, validating, and empowering for autistic women.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the often cringy advice that autistic women hear.
In part one, we really unpacked why some of this advice, while well-intentioned, can be quite harmful. Now let's kind of shift gears and explore some alternative responses that are more supportive and validating.
I like it.
The blog post we're discussing actually provides some great examples of how we can reframe our language to be more understanding and helpful.
Let's do it.
So let's go back to that first piece of advice that we talked about. You just need to be more confident in social situations.
Right.
And see how we can approach it differently.
Yeah.
So instead of telling someone to be more confident, which can feel dismissive and invalidating, what if we said something like, I hear that you're feeling anxious in social situations. What are some things that might help you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, that's such a powerful shift.
Yeah.
It acknowledges the person's feelings, validates their experience, and it opens the door for a collaborative conversation about their needs.
It's about shifting from giving unsolicited advice to actually listening and trying to understand their perspective.
Yeah. That can make a world of difference for someone who's struggling with social anxiety.
So now let's tackle that cringe-worthy advice of trying to be more like a specific neurotypical woman.
Yeah, instead of pushing someone to conform, what if we said something like, I really admire your individuality. What are some of the things that make you unique and awesome?
I love that.
Yeah.
It shifts the focus from deficits to strengths and encourages the person to embrace what makes them special.
It's about celebrating neurodiversity and recognizing that there's no one right way to be a woman.
Okay, what about that dismissive advice? You're just being too sensitive.
I hate that one.
How can we respond to that in a way that acknowledges those very real sensory sensitivities that so many autistic individuals experience?
Yeah, instead of minimizing their experience, we could say something like, I can see that you're feeling overwhelmed right now. What can I do to help? Do you need a quiet space or a break from all the stimulation?
It's about offering practical support and recognizing that sensory overload is a real phenomenon.
Yeah. Not just a matter of being oversensitive. And it shows that you're willing to make adjustments and accommodations to help them feel more comfortable.
Now let's move on to that advice about faking it till you make it.
Oh.
Which, as we discussed, can be incredibly harmful because it encourages masking.
Yes. Instead of telling someone to suppress their authentic self What if we said, I really appreciate your honesty and your willingness to be yourself. What are some things that I can do to make you feel more comfortable being your true self around me?
That's such a powerful message of acceptance.
Yeah, it is.
It tells the person that they don't need to pretend to be someone they're not
Right.
in order to be valued and respected.
It creates a space for authenticity and encourages the person to embrace their neurodiversity.
And finally, let's address that last piece of advice.
Okay.
The one that dismisses someone's autism diagnosis by saying something like, "You're not really autistic, you're just," and then insert some stereotype.
I hate that.
This one is so damaging because it invalidates the person's lived experience and perpetuates these harmful stereotypes.
Yes. Instead of questioning their diagnosis, we could say, I believe you, and I respect your self-identification. How can I be a better ally to you and help create a more inclusive environment?
It's about trusting the person's knowledge of their own experience and showing a willingness to learn and grow.
It also shifts the focus from doubt and skepticism to support and allyship.
Now remember, these are just a few examples,
Right.
and the specific language you use will depend on the situation and your relationship with the person.
Of course.
But the key takeaway here is that it's all about shifting our mindset
Okay.
from giving unsolicited advice to actively listening, validating, and supporting autistic women in a way that respects their neurodiversity.
I love that.
It's about recognizing that their experiences are valid, their perspectives are valuable,
Yes.
and their voices deserve to be heard.
100%.
This has been a really insightful discussion so far.
It really has.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore. In part 3, we'll delve into some additional insights in the blog post and discuss some of the broader implications of what we've learned.
Sounds good.
We'll also touch on some resources and organizations that are doing some incredible work
Okay.
in the field of autism advocacy and support.
Perfect.
Until then, we encourage you to reflect on what we've discussed today and consider how you can apply these insights to your own interactions with autistic individuals.
Yeah.
Even small changes in our language and behavior can make a big difference in creating a more inclusive and welcoming world for everyone. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of worst cringy advice autistic women hear. And I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
this blog post has really been eye-opening for me.
Me too. It's been really interesting to break down these pieces of advice and see how they can perpetuate stereotypes and invalidate the experiences of autistic women.
You know, one thing that keeps coming up for me is this idea of internalized ableism,
Yeah.
where autistic individuals start to believe these negative messages.
Right. It's like they're internalizing society's discomfort with neurodiversity.
Yeah, and it makes the blog's emphasis on believing and validating the experiences of autistic women all the more crucial.
Absolutely. When the world's telling you that you're wrong or you're broken, to have someone say, I believe you, I see you, your experiences are valid.
Right.
It can be incredibly powerful.
It can be that first step towards dismantling those negative beliefs and empowering autistic women to embrace their authentic selves.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual validation. It's about advocating for systemic change.
Yeah, I think that's a key point here. This isn't just about being nicer to autistic people.
Yeah.
It's about challenging societal structures that privilege neurotypicality
Yes.
and create barriers for anyone who deviates from the norm.
Think about the expectations on autistic women to be high-functioning and to blend in. It's an impossible standard that forces them to mask who they are.
It's like they're trapped in a double bind.
Right.
If they're open about their autism, they risk being judged or discriminated against. But if they mask their traits, they're essentially living a lie.
And sacrificing their well-being in the process.
Right. It's a no-win situation.
Yeah, and it highlights the need for broader societal awareness and acceptance of neurodiversity.
Yeah.
We need to move away from the idea that there's only one right way to be and create space for everyone to thrive, regardless of their neurological differences.
And that reminds me of another important point from the blog post.
Okay.
This recognition that autism is a spectrum.
Yes.
There's no single autistic experience.
Right.
And each individual will navigate the world in their own unique way.
Exactly. We need to get rid of this monolithic image of autism.
Yeah.
Autistic women especially don't often fit that stereotype,
Right.
which can lead to misdiagnosis, invalidation, and isolation.
It's like we're all trying to fit into the same box.
Right.
And anyone who doesn't fit is labeled as wrong or deficient.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to listen to and learn from the diverse experiences of autistic people. The
Hmm.
more we understand the spectrum of autism, the better we'll be able to create inclusive and accepting environments.
Speaking of resources, are there any organizations or online communities you would recommend for our listeners
Sure.
who want to learn more about supporting autistic women?
Absolutely. The Autism Self-Advocacy Network is an excellent resource led by autistic people themselves.
Okay,
They provide information and advocate for policies that empower autistic people.
great. And what about for specifically autistic women?
Yeah, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network is a great organization
Okay.
that amplifies the voices and experiences of autistic women and non-binary individuals.
Yeah, and I think a simple online search will reveal countless other organizations, blogs, and social media groups
Certainly.
dedicated to autism awareness and advocacy.
Yeah,
And so don't hesitate to reach out and connect with these communities.
yeah,
Well, this deep dive has been truly eye-opening for me,
it has been for me too.
and I hope it's been for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
As we wrap up, I just want to leave you with a thought.
Okay.
What small steps can you take today to become a more informed and compassionate ally to autistic individuals?
How can you challenge your own biases, amplify autistic voices, and create a more inclusive world where everyone feels valued and respected?
Remember, even small actions can make a difference. Let's work together to create a world where neurodiversity is celebrated and not stigmatized.
Yes, I love that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive,
Of course.
and keep exploring.